Morgues are supposed to be silent, but sometimes they aren't. Late at night, when the halls are empty and the bodies are still, there are whispers. Objects move on their own. And the dead don't always stay where they should. Tonight, we dive into the dark secrets that morgue workers are too afraid to talk about. If you think the dead can't hurt you, you might want to think again. This story didn't happen to me, but to someone I trust. A man who never speaks of nonsense, who doesn't believe in ghosts, demons, or any of those things. And yet, when he told me this story, his hands shook, and his voice trembled in a way I had never seen before. He was driving late at night, taking a shortcut through a road he had never used before. It was one of those empty highways that stretch endlessly into the night, where the only light comes from your own headlights and the occasional flickering of an old street lamp. The radio had long since lost signal, leaving him alone with the hum of the engine and the rhythmic sound of the tires rolling over the asphalt. He wasn't worried. It was just another road, another drive. Until he saw something in the distance. First, he thought it was an animal. A dark shape lying in the middle of the road, unmoving. He slowed down, squinting against the glare of his own headlights, and realized it was a person. A man lying face down on the pavement. His heart kicked up a notch. He had heard stories about traps like this, criminals staging accidents to get someone to stop. But something about this didn't feel right. The man wasn't moving, not even the smallest twitch. He came to a stop a few meters away, fingers tightening around the steering wheel. He leaned forward slightly, trying to see if there was any movement, any sign of life. The figure remained still. The fog hanging over the road made it harder to tell, but something felt off about the way he was lying there. Like he wasn't just unconscious, like he had been placed there. His instincts screamed at him to drive away, but something stronger held him in place. If the man was hurt, if he had been hit by another car and left there to die, could he really just leave? He reached for his phone, intending to call for help, but then he noticed something. The man was wearing dark clothes, almost blending into the road, except for one detail. His hands. They were pale. Too pale. And positioned strangely. Fingers stretched stiffly against the asphalt, like they had been frozen mid-motion. Then as he stared, something moved. Not the man. The shadows around him. They shifted unnaturally, stretching toward the car like reaching fingers. His breath hitched. The air inside the vehicle suddenly felt heavy, pressing against his chest. He put his hand on the gearshift, ready to floor it, but before he could react, the figure in the road moved. Not naturally. Not like someone regaining consciousness. It snapped into motion, its body jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. Its head twisted too far to the side, the mouth yawning open in a silent scream. And then, in a single jarring movement, it pushed itself up onto all fours and sprinted toward the car. His reaction was pure instinct. He slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching as he backed away. The figure ran unnaturally fast, limbs jerking like a marionette, its mouth still hanging open in a soundless howl. The headlights cast its shadow long across the pavement, and for a split second, he saw it. The face wasn't human. Black hollow eyes. A stretched grin that didn't belong to any living thing. He yanked the wheel, spinning the car around, nearly losing control as he fought against the pull of the wet road. The thing slammed into the side of his vehicle with a sickening thud, fingers scraping against the metal as he sped away. The rear-view mirror trembled from the impact, and for one horrifying second, he saw the reflection. It wasn't alone. Figures stood on the roadside, watching, waiting. Their eyes were black voids, their bodies barely more than shifting silhouettes. They didn't move. They didn't chase him. They only watched. The road stretched ahead, endless, the fog thickening around him. His heart pounded as he drove faster, the highway twisting in ways it shouldn't. He swore he had been driving straight, but the road felt wrong, unfamiliar, as if it were leading him somewhere else. And then, without warning, the headlights caught something ahead. Sign. The words were barely readable through the grime and rust, But when he did see them, his stomach dropped. Welcome to Black Hollow. He had never heard of the place. It wasn't on his map. He had only driven for 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. He gripped the wheel, muttering to himself, trying to shake the unease curling in his gut. There had to be an exit, another road that would take him back to where he had been. But the further he drove, the darker it got. The streetlights were gone. Even the fog had vanished, leaving only a vast, empty blackness pressing in on all sides. Then he saw them again, lined along the side of the road, their bodies still as statues. Watching. His hands were shaking. He had to stop. He had to think. He pulled over, chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. He checked his phone, no service. He looked at the clock, 3:14 a.m. It had been 3:14 for the past half hour. The figures were closer now. He reached for the gear shift again, ready to speed off, but before he could, his passenger door unlocked. The sound was deafening in the silence. A simple click, but it sent ice through his veins. Slowly he turned his head. The seat next to him was empty. But the mirror wasn't. In the reflection, something was sitting there. Something grinning. His breath came in ragged gasps. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to see it. But the thing in the mirror leaned closer. He felt the air in the cab shift. Felt the weight of something settling beside him. Then it spoke. Just 2 words, but they froze his blood. Keep driving. His vision blurred with panic. His hands trembled, but he obeyed. He didn't know how long he drove. He didn't know if the road was real or if he was lost in something much worse. At some point, dawn began to break. The sky lightened. The figures were gone. The road returned to something familiar. And then, just like that, he was back where he had started. No sign of Black Hollow. No strange figures. No twisted road that led nowhere. But when he got home, he made one mistake. He glanced at his passenger seat. And there, burned into the fabric, were 2 words, seared deep into the material like an old scar. Come back. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. But sometimes in the security cameras of that morgue, the door opens on its own, and something walks out. Morgues are meant for the dead. But sometimes, something else is in there with them. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more terrifying encounters, make sure to subscribe. Because the dead don't always rest. And neither should you.